he can make sure I tell it right. Make sure I did it right. Okay. You're welcome to stay for this. This is just a class, but I know you might be busy, so whatever. It's good to meet you. Yes. Yeah. No, I'll give you my card. All right, my friends on YouTube, we are going to start this class now on escrow management. And I'm here in the room with a bunch of people. And we are going to get right started. So today, we are talking about escrow. And that's what we're going to do today. And so what do we mean? I'm sorry, it's a little dark on the side. Is that okay? All right. So what do we want to talk about today? What is escrow? It's a term that some of us may not be that familiar with. So we're going to talk about what escrow is. What is the role of the agent in the transaction? What are some typical activities that we do when we're managing an escrow? We're going to do a case study of a specific situation, and then we're going to do some final thoughts, and we'll be all done. Does that sound okay with you guys? All right. Okay, so what is escrow? Escrow is a legal arrangement. It's just a term we use to describe a neutral third party. You heard about this in real estate school. A neutral third party that holds the money and documents for a transaction of a legal nature until specific conditions are met. Once those conditions are met, they release the money and they release the documents. Do you guys think that buying a house is a legal transaction? Of course, right? So that's what this is. There is a company, a business that is called an escrow company, right? There's ones like Old Republic Title Company. There's Chicago Title Company. There's First American. There's a bunch of companies that manage escrows. And their job is to be the independent third party. Here in California, we do not use lawyers for real estate transactions. We use these companies instead. All right. So another way to think about escrow from the point of view of a real estate transaction is it's like a container. It's like a physical box, and we pour things into it. We move stuff in and out of the box. We move money in and out of the box, documents, and activities. Can anyone think of an example of money moving into a real estate escrow box, moving into escrow as part of a transaction that is an escrow? What kind of money would move into that pot? The deposit, the initial deposit. That's right. The money from the lender, the buyer's down payment are all money that goes in. And then escrow disperses it at the end, takes it out of the pot, and sends it to different places, like the seller, for example, but not exclusively. Movement of documents. What's a typical document that goes through escrow? The offer, the actual contract, because escrow needs to know the terms. They need to know the deal. So the contract, the residential purchase agreement in California, but also the grant deed, transferring ownership, the deed of trust for the loan, if there's a loan, all those types of things. And management of activities. What kind of activities flow through escrow? What's the big thing that escrow does in terms of an activity? You have one? Well, that's sort of managed outside of escrow, the actual terms. But what about recording? Escrow manages getting the deal done and formalized with the county. That's recording. We're going to talk more about that later. So escrow starts when a purchase agreement is ratified. Escrow starts when a purchase agreement is ratified, and it only ends under two circumstances. Otherwise, it isn't over yet. It either ends because the transaction is done and the transfer of title is recorded with the county where the sale took place, or the transaction is canceled. That's how escrows end. All right. So let's talk about ratification. I said to you before, escrow starts when a purchase agreement is ratified. When does ratification happen? What do we mean by that? Yeah. No. Contract. That's long after that. That buyer representation is for when you agree to work with a buyer, and it gets ratified too. Ratification means the deal is done. right? That's what it means. So it could be a buyer representation, but in today's context, we're talking about a purchase agreement. Okay, but you have the right idea. Every agreement, every legal document is ratified. What makes it ratified? What makes it a deal? Both parties agree. And how do they do that? They sign. All right. So, Darwin, you are the buyer's agent. You submit an offer to Ben, the listing agent. Ben calls you and says, "Great news, Darwin. The sellers are going to accept your offer." Are you ratified yet? Ben goes to his seller and he says, "Mr. Seller, this is a great offer from Darwin's clients. Please sign it." And he's with them physically and they sign it, or even DocuSign. They DocuSign it back to him. Is it ratified yet? No. What does Ben need to do to make it ratified? They signed it. No, they wrote the offer. They wrote the offer. Send it back. Right. So you email it to the email address on the contract, because the contract has to specify the email address. Is it ratified? Even if he hasn't opened the email, is it ratified? You sure? Yes. It is ratified as soon as it is sent by the side, the final side. It is ratified, whether he opens the email or not. Now, you're good agents. Ben is gonna phone and say, "Did you get it?" Right? But it is ratified legally as soon as it is sent, as long as it is sent to that email address. End of story. Let's take another scenario. Stephanie represents a buyer. She writes the offer to, say, Serena's seller, maybe on this listing that they have, right? And they are so excited to get a listing, but their seller, even though this is the first offer after months, the seller says, this price is just too low. And he instructs Serena to send a counter offer back to Stephanie. Stephanie gets the counter offer. It's signed by him. She emails the counter offer, but DocuSign over to, or even just as a PDF. You wouldn't DocuSign it. You'd send it as a PDF. And Stephanie gets it. She shares with her buyer, "Great news. We got a counter offer. I think this price is manageable. Do you like it, Mr. Buyer? Is this price manageable for you?" And the buyer says, "Yes, let's do it." Is she ratified? No. No. That's right. So now you have your buyer sign the counter, and the buyer signs the counter. Is it ratified yet? Got to send it back. Stephanie sends it back. She sends it to the email address that the seller has told her that is in the contract or in the instructions. Is it ratified? Yes, it is ratified. Okay, that's the key to ratification. It's when the final signing party emails or delivers, it could be in person, the document to the other side. That creates a ratification. Now, why is this important? Let us suppose that it is 11:59 p.m. on a Friday of a long weekend that Stephanie sends the accepted counter offer over. 11:59 is the date stamp on her email. What is the day of ratification? Is it Friday, 11:59 p.m.? Yeah, no, it is. It is. The date stamp on the email is the date of ratification. But in contracts, we have to start counting the days because things are going to happen, right? We need to know the days. We need to know when the keys are going to be delivered, specific to the calendar day. When is day one? Monday? No, the next day. No business days are relevant for the start of deadlines. For the start of counting, business days are not relevant. They're only relevant for initial deposit and for the deadlines on obligations. But the way to think about this is all events in the contract start next day, except for the initial deposit. With the exception of initial deposit, everything else starts next day. So it doesn't matter whether it's a holiday or not. Okay. Initial deposit is a special case. All right, let's keep going. So what is your role? So we understand now that escrow is this pot. We're going to keep track of the transaction. We're not going to use lawyers. They're going to handle the transfers of money. They're going to handle the documents. They're going to get it recorded. They're doing a lot of important stuff for which buyers usually pay in our area for that. It's part of their closing costs. It's not free, right? All right. So you are the buyer's agent, let's say, in this example we're going to create you. But the thing to remember about this is you are the project manager of the transaction. How many people here have project management experience? Anybody have project management experience? Anyone here ever worked with a project manager before? Right. So those guys are nuts, right? I used to be a project manager. They got to coordinate with marketing. They got to coordinate with sales. They got to coordinate with product development. They got to coordinate with engineering. They got to report with QC, quality assurance. They got to coordinate maybe with the VP, the executive suite. They may have to coordinate with outside vendors and outside third-party support. I mean, it's crazy. So what makes that different from us? Nothing. We are the project managers of these transactions. So who can think of some things? Well, let's some of the people that we manage in this transaction. Who would we be managing, Jesse, in our role as project manager of the deal? Who would we be managing? What other individuals? Yeah, like I talked about. So these are other people involved in your transaction. You need to know what's going on with them. And so you're the buyer's agent. So the buyer is one. What about the buyer's lender? What about the appraiser? What about the home inspector, the pest inspector? What about the seller's agent? What about the title company escrow officer? Those are all examples of other people that you need to know what's going on with them, and they need to know what's going on with you. So your job is to keep your client, the buyer, on track regarding all their contractual obligations. The contract makes your buyer have commitments to the deal, right? You need to make sure your buyer's doing what they're supposed to do. You're going to coordinate with all those other people to keep everyone, so to speak, on the same page, right? What is your job? To get the deal done. That's what you have to do. Get the deal done. Now, you always must act as a fiduciary for your client. Your client's needs come first. Do you remember how I told you that there are only two ways that an escrow ends earlier? One, it ends by the deal's done and the file gets recorded at the county, the transfer of ownership. The other way is that it gets canceled. Sometimes that's what you need to do for your buyer. All right. Your job is to verify the accuracy and the completion of all the legal documents associated with the deal, whether or not you work with a transaction coordinator. So Darwin closed a deal last week. Did you work with a transaction coordinator? They helped you a lot, didn't they? They prepared all kinds of documents for you and your buyer and for the other side to sign. But your job was to make sure that they had all of them. It's your job to make sure that nothing was missed and that they use the right forms, right? That's not the transaction coordinator's job. They're at they should be doing what you tell them to do, right? So they are not responsible for incorrect forms. You are. And if there is a document did you have your transaction coordinator ever say to you, you need to send that document, I can't send it for you? Yeah, once or twice. There are certain documents where they're not allowed to send it to the seller. You have to do it because it is so important to the contract that they can't take responsibility for that. So, for example, a contingency release, is normally you're going to send that. You're not going to use your TC for that, for example. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a case study, but we're going to just first start by talking about 15 typical steps in an escrow. And I want to point out, guys, that I use the word typical. Real estate transactions are complicated, so you may have different steps and different orders and other things. It depends on the deal, okay? But these are very typical ones. So number one, you're going to open escrow. We're going to go through them each, right? Open escrow, arrange the initial deposit, review the disclosures from the seller, verify the insurance, order and complete inspections, confirm and complete the appraisal, file your commission demands so you get paid, verify the loan is going through properly, complete your agent visual inspection disclosure, or the AVID short form, remove the contingencies, final walkthrough with your client, buyer signing, recording, giving them their keys, and celebrations. Those are the basic ones. Darwin, you just closed the deal. Is this more or less right? Did I get everything? More or less?
Yeah, if like if the seller has done the inspections before.
Yeah, then maybe you won't do number 5. You're right. You might not if it's a non-contingent offer and the seller did inspections. So sometimes some of these come out and come in. If you have a cash buyer, maybe number 6 doesn't happen. Sometimes cash buyers don't do appraisals. Okay? So it depends. But this is a guide, right? So let's take a case study. So we're going to now look at all of these 15 things in the point of view of this example. So what's our example? $1 million sale price for a condo where you represent the buyer. Okay. It's a 30-day deal. What does that mean? What happens at 30 days? And what does that mean for the buyer? Yes, thank you, Stephanie. They get their keys. That's all they're thinking. When do I get my keys? Right? 10 days for investigation contingency. 14 days for appraisal contingency, 17 days for the loan contingency. And we have a disclosure package, yay, from the seller that includes the TDS, SPQ, and listing agent AVID. TDS stands for Transfer Disclosure Statement. SPQ stands for Seller Property Questionnaire, both of which are required for most transactions. And the listing agent is required to do an inspection of their own. That's the AVID, Agent Visual Inspection. So that's what's in our package. And that's what we've received prior to getting into contract. Now, sometimes you'll get a package that has a lot more in it, in many, many cases, but this also happens. Okay. Everyone okay with our case study? Okay. All right. Task number 1 of 15, we're going to open escrow. What does that mean? First of all, it happens as soon as possible. If you ratify at 11:59 a.m. on a Friday night of a long weekend, guess when you get to open escrow? Those are the escrow offices aren't open on the weekends. This is a Best Buy. You got to wait until business. That's Tuesday morning. Tuesday morning. Okay. You can't open escrow if the office is closed. Okay. So you're going to open escrow. So you're going to connect with the escrow officer. How do you know who the escrow officer is? If it's their escrow officer, but you get to choose. You're in your offer who the escrow company is going to be. So it might be yours. But yeah, you don't even need to ask them because if the listing agent has already chosen one, they will normally communicate it with it. You'll know it when you're writing the offer. Darwin, when you wrote your offer, did you already know who the escrow officer was when you wrote the offer? Yeah. You're going to send the contract. RPA stands for Residential Purchase Agreement. You're going to send that to them, usually as a PDF, all 17 pages. Okay. You're going to send contact information for your buyer, your buyer's lender, and your transaction coordinator, if you use one, to escrow. It's just a simple email. Hi, I'm so happy to be opening an escrow with your office. Attached is a PDF of the contract. My buyer's name and number is this, and their email. My buyer's lender's name and number and email is this. And my transaction coordinator is Judy Smith. I've CC'd her on this call, on this email. Right? Very simple. But you got to do it as soon as possible. Sometimes if you ratify at 11 o'clock in the morning, you call escrow at 12 noon. Right? Then you're going to send all of the paperwork that your buyer has signed to them because they may not have a copy, especially if some stuff was handled by hand. So you want to make sure they have fully signed copies with all the seller signatures on it. And your buyer needs to know who your transaction coordinator is. You want to do a handoff of that too, right? You want to do you want to send an email, Mr. Buyer, I'm so delighted that you got into contract. Congratulations. Here are some of the key players in our deal. Here's the escrow officer name and number. Here is the contact information for my transaction coordinator. Expect to get emails with her because you're going to be signing a lot of paperwork and she'll take care of it. Your second task, arrange the initial deposit, ideally within 1 day of ratification. If you write an offer so does anyone know what the standard number of days is for an initial deposit in the contract? 3 days, that's right. But it's 3 business days. That's the exception to the counting days rule. So if we ratify at 11:59 p.m. on a Friday night of a long weekend, what is day 1 for the deposit of a long weekend? Tuesday, which means the deposit isn't due until Thursday. ratified Friday night. So that can happen. I've had it happen. Okay. So remember, when you're counting days for deposit, you only count business days beginning with the day after ratification. And if you are counting days for everything else, it starts the immediate calendar day next. So you need to arrange for this. You need to make sure your buyer, as the agent for your buyer, gets that deposit over. How can they do it? Well, the contract defines it. Personal check, wire transfer, electronic funds transfer. It's specified in the contract how they're going to deliver the deposit. You should have a conversation with your buyer when you're writing the offer. How do you intend to get the money over? You'll have this, if the offer gets accepted today, you'll need to get it by this day. Have that conversation. Darwin, in your recent transaction, how did your buyer deliver their deposit?
Wire.
Wire transfer. Now, wire transfer is very fast, but it costs money. Most buyers don't like to do it because it's $25 or more in many banks. So what they often prefer to do is to write a personal check or to do a money order, which is a lot cheaper. Now, the good news about this is escrow companies will send a courier over to pick up a check from where you work. Or your buyer may choose, I work 5 minutes from the escrow office. I'm going to drop it over. Or I work 5 minutes over from this office. Now I know the office where the escrow is in Albany, but my office in Fremont, I'm only 5 minutes from the same companies. Can I take it over there? And the answer is yes. But you need to let the escrow officer know. Everyone needs to be on the same page that they got to send an internal courier to pick it up from their sister office. Happens all the time. Your job is to make sure this happens, right? Especially if it's time, because it's time sensitive. Because if you don't get that deposit in the deadline of the contract, the seller now has a cancellation, has the ability to force a cancellation. They can't cancel immediately, but they can force it, right? So you leave an opening for the seller. So you don't want that. Plus, it reduces trust. I mean, if you're a seller and the buyer doesn't get their deposit in time, how do you feel about that buyer? A little sketchy, right? So this is really important. Number 3, you want escrow to know the terms, not just because it's not good enough just to send escrow the contract and just assume they know what the terms are. No, you want to make sure you have it in a chart format. Transaction coordinators will help you with this. Things like rent backs, who pays for home warranty, stuff like that. Who pays for sewer lateral if that's a relevant issue. The escrow companies have developed little Q&A charts, and so do the better TCs, transaction coordinators. They have it all set up for you. You just need to verify the information is correct. But if you're not working with a transaction coordinator, you get on the phone with the escrow officer and you go over the terms. That's the way we used to do it in the old days. It was all phone, right? Okay, but this is super important. You want to verify that escrow understands the terms of the contract the same way you do. You know, who's paying for the home warranty? When does the buyer have to get their deposit in? When is this deal closing? Make sure everyone's on the same page about all of it. All right, next, review disclosures. Okay, so in our example, we did get a disclosure package. Disclosure package including TDS, SPQ, and AVID. You want to review the disclosure package within 1 to 3 days of getting the disclosures, okay? No matter when that is. And you want to review it with your client within 1 day of when the contingency for disclosures will be removed from the transaction. So if the buyer has an investigation contingency, like in our example, it's a 10-day investigation contingency, you want to be reviewing these disclosures no later than day 9, right? What if the buyer is writing non-contingent? When do you need to review the contingencies then? If you have them. If you have the disclosures and you're writing non-contingent on no investigation contingency, no disclosure contingency, you need to review it when? Prior to writing the offer. Yes. Yes. All right. So let's suppose in our example, we've got a TDS, an SPQ, and an AVID. The first job is to verify, and this is true whether you get a bigger package or not. It doesn't matter. Whatever you get from the seller, whenever you get it, you need to verify that it is a complete package. In our example, what's missing? What's missing? We have a $1 million sale price for a condo. We've gotten a disclosure package that has a TDS SPQ and a listing agent AVID. What's missing that is legally required? I'm talking about disclosure documents, so no. Sorry? It's right there, TDS. We have the TDS. Yes, natural hazard disclosure is legally required. Yeah, that's one thing missing. What's another big missing item? There's two more big ticket items that are missing. How about a preliminary title report? There's no title report. And that's the other one. There's no HOA docs. It's a condo. We don't have HOA docs. Okay. So your job, guys, as a buyer's agent is to make sure there's nothing missing. And then your secondary job, once you realize that all this stuff is missing, is make sure the seller's going to get them to you. Now, you don't have to go get them. It's the listing agent side. They have to give them to you. So your job is to be assertive and say, Mr. Listing Agent, we are so happy to be in contract. Well, my buyer has a 10-day contingency, but I don't have HOA docs. I don't have a prelim. I don't have the NHD. And there's others that you might be requesting too. But those are the big three. And the listing agent will say, yeah, I know. My seller didn't want to pay the HOA fee to pay for the docs. All these HOAs, they charge a fee, $400 or $500 just for the docs. He didn't want to pay it until I had a buyer under contract. I'm going to order it today. Thank you. That's an example, right? You are going to prepare a list on your own side, not to necessarily share. Don't share it with your client don't send it to your client, this list, but you are going to study the disclosures and prepare a list of notable information you learn from reviewing the disclosures. Now, disclosures are tricky because you never want, and then you're going to review the disclosures with your client. But when you are reviewing disclosures with your client, if you don't remember anything else from today, remember this. You may not tell your buyer that this is important disclosure and that's not important disclosure. You cannot distinguish. You have no idea what's going to be important to your buyer that you don't think is important. You have things that you've observed, but when you present them to your buyer, make sure you tell them that they are obligated to review the package of disclosures and ask you questions. You're going to do your best to help them observe things that you've observed, but it is absolutely no excuse for them not to review things that are important to them. And if they don't understand something, they must tell you, I just didn't understand this. What is this about? And you can help them with that. But you can't tell them, oh, this home inspection item under foundation, that's really the most important thing here. That's dangerous because they'll buy the house, they'll know about the foundation, but they won't have spent any attention on the roof. The roof fails. Who are they going after? Why didn't you tell me about the roof? A lot of buyers, even though they're spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, they kind of don't like to read 300-page documents. And their attitude is, my agent will tell me if anything's important in there. But no, don't get into that. Be very careful. If you need to, put it in writing. My comments are in no way an excuse for you not to have to read this. Please review and ask me questions because I can't read your mind and know exactly what's important to you. Please let me know what you don't understand. I'll tell you what every form means. You can do that. Let's go through the disclosures. Let's sit down over a cup of tea or a coffee and let's go over all the disclosures. This means this. This form tells you this. This form tells you that. Without any judgment. Oh, this is important. That's not important. Okay, be very careful about that, guys. All right. You're going to verify insurance. This has become a huge issue. Home insurance rates have popped up 200, 300%. Condos too. And so before you can get a loan, the lender's going to want to make sure that insurance is in place for a buyer. And your buyer is going to be anticipating how much per month insurance is going to cost. The sooner you know what a quote looks like or several quotes, the better your buyer's going to be. I often get insurance quotes before we even write the offer because it's so impactful on the monthly payment. Because many people roll the monthly payment for insurance into their loan payment. Okay? So this is really important. You want to do that. If it hasn't happened before you wrote the offer, make sure it happens in the first few days. you're going to order and complete inspections. Now, if you are writing non-contingent when in a scenario where there are inspections, then as Darwin pointed out, maybe you don't do that. But in our case study, the disclosure package did not include any inspections. So you will be ordering them. My recommendation is you order the inspections as early as possible. Typically, we order a property inspection, a home inspection, and we order a pest inspection in many cases. What are the difference? What is the main difference between the two of those? What's the main difference, Darwin, between a pest inspection and a home inspection?
One is inspected they have a termite or fungus.
Mm-hmm.
That one is the structure of the property. Or
You're on the right track. Here's the way I like to describe it. A pest inspection is about pest destroying, wood destroying insects and damage to wood. That's all it is. A pest inspection checks to make sure wood fungus is damaged to wood or termites, right? That's a pest inspection. But a home inspection is looking at the systems of the house. Don't say structure because it's more than that. It's everything: electrical, plumbing, heating, structure, drainage, aesthetics, sometimes landscaping issues. Anything about the systems of the house. All right, so you're going to order this as quickly as possible. Why do you want to order this as fast as possible? You have a 10-day investigation contingency. Why can't you order it on day 7?
Review it.
Janet, that's true, but what about the availability of the inspector? The availability of the inspector may not be available next day. They're not going to drop all their appointments. They may be booking out 2 weeks. You may not be able to get your first inspector choice. You may have to go to choice number 2 or 3. So you not only want to order it as soon as possible, but you need to complete it as soon as possible and definitely before the deadline. So you have time to review it with your client, right? So here's some of the things you're going to do. You're going to schedule the inspection. You need to coordinate with, who do you need to coordinate with besides your buyer? And the seller's agent. You just can't come over to the property, even if it's vacant. You still need permission from the listing agent, right? Attend all these inspections and encourage your buyer to as well. You need to arrange to make sure your buyer knows what they got to pay the inspector, and then make sure they have the money set aside and ready to pay the inspector. You have to arrange that they're going to get the report. If there's going to be a written report, you're going to get that in time, not 3 days after your deadline, right? You need to have time to review the report yourself and arrange a report viewing time with your buyer. By the way, same as other disclosures, do not be going to tell the buyer anything, any kind of interpretation of the report that the inspector provides. All questions about the report should go to the inspector. The inspector, in many cases, will outline high and low concern items, especially in a home inspection. That's their designation of what's high and low and medium importance. But as we do in other classes, I teach you how to review and read these things so you can provide guidance to your clients and have them understand what questions to ask. But ultimately, it's up to any questions about those reports should be directed to the inspectors. All right. You're going to order a home warranty if applicable. What is the difference between home warranty and insurance?
Protects the clients.
Yes. Yes.
The house.
Yes. Yes. The way they tell me, you're right. Another way of looking at it is home insurance protects your buyer against sudden and catastrophic damage. Flood, certain types of water damage, fire, right? It's for sudden and catastrophic things. Whereas home warranty is a buyer protection plan, like Geek Squad for your big screen TV. That's all it is. Okay, a home warranty has nothing to do with insurance, and it's really just an appliance protection plan. Except instead of it being for a big screen TV, it's for the water heater and the dishwasher, right? So if your buyer has written an offer that includes a home warranty provision, the offer will say who pays for it. You want to make sure that whoever's paying for it knows they're going to have to pay for it because they'll forget, right? You want to review if your buyer is getting one, even if they're not paying for it, they will be the ones typically reviewing the options and choosing what level of ABC, gold, medium, gold, silver, bronze package they're going to buy. And what will happen is this, you're going to communicate this with the home warranty company, who will send an invoice to the escrow, so the escrow knows to bill the appropriate party at the end of the deal, either the buyer or the seller or somebody else, right? Sometimes the amount in the contract actually specifies how much you're going to pay for this. Sometimes the amount the buyer wants in their plan is $20, $50 higher than the contract says. If that happens, we have to figure out who's going to pay the difference. Who could pay the difference? Who could pay the difference? There's a $50 discrepancy. The home warranty the buyer wants versus the one that is, let's say the seller's paying. Let's suppose the seller's agreed to pay $500 to a home warranty, but the cost of the warranty your buyer wants is $550. Who pays the $50? Sorry? The buyer might. Who else might pay it? The agent might pay it. Who else? Lender. Yeah. I often cover it myself if there's an overage of $50 or $20 or something. I don't want to bother my client with a $20 extra charge on their closing when they're worried about, do they have enough money for the I mean, there's so much more money in play. I'm not going to get hung up on $20, right? I can afford to eat it, right? That's my attitude. Sometimes your buyers say, I don't care. You say to buy, it's going to cost a little more, or do you want to buy that more expensive package? And they may say, sure, I don't care, I'll pay it. And they volunteer. And that's fine too. Sometimes the seller may be okay with it too, but that would almost require an addendum to the contract because the contract is explicit on that, if the seller is paying. All right, let's keep going. Sometimes the seller's agent pays for these things too. All right, confirm and complete the appraisal. If there is an appraisal, as there is in our example, you want to confirm that the appraisal is happening as soon as possible, because appraisers get super busy when the market is hot, and sometimes they're booking 2 weeks out too, and it's hard to get an appraisal in a timely manner for your contract. So you want to verify it with the lender. The lender orders the appraisal on behalf of your buyer, but your buyer has to pay for it with a credit card. So very often what happens is it gets hung up and the appraiser doesn't get assigned because your buyer hasn't paid the credit card. So you got to follow up with your buyer and with the lender to make sure it's ordered, and we have a date for it. And I would do this within a couple of days of opening escrow typically. Don't let this go more than a day or two. You might not get to it on day one because there's so many other things to do on day one, but definitely by day two, you want to make sure that appraisal's been ordered. You're going to coordinate with the buyer's lender to verify expedient ordering. That's what I just said. You're going to coordinate with the listing agent regarding the appraiser going on site to take his measurements and to do his analysis. Why? Because the listing agent still controls the property. You're not going on site with anybody without permission of the listing agent, right? You're going to prepare comps to show the appraiser, and you're going to attend the appraisal, if at all possible, to share your comps with the appraiser. They love this, by the way. They might not have considered that comp. Maybe you were in the house. This is why knowing the neighborhood is really good. Let's suppose when you were showing properties, you went into a house that is now closed escrow or is pending. You can go to the appraisal and he might be using that comp. You can say, that 27 Fillmore Street, it's not a really good comp. This house is worth way more because I went into 27 Fillmore Street, and even though it's closed now, you can't get in, but I was there and it had this, I don't know. It didn't have a pool. It didn't have the double car garage. Well, those are obvious things. He would know that. You could say the kitchen wasn't remodeled. The kitchen here is clearly remodeled and much more spacious. You can just give them examples of reasons why this property is superior, right? So that's something you can do when you attend an appraisal in person and share comps. Yes. Yeah. Yes, and that's great. That's great. Yeah, because buyer's agent and listing agent both want the property to appraise. Sure. So maybe they're sharing comps together. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Both sides are invested in the property appraising for what it's being paid for. They may even have the similar comps. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Now, you don't want the listing agent there when you're bringing in your home inspector or your pest inspector, but for the appraisal,
then I would communicate to listen to it, hey, the appraisal is done. And just kind of communicate with that with.
And I'm gonna go too. Yeah, but I would say more like, is it okay if my appraiser comes out on 10 a.m. on Wednesday? And anybody else. Your buyer doesn't own the house yet. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you still need permission. And the appraiser, you should just inform, it depends. If it's owner occupied, it's even more complicated, or tenant occupied. Anyway, the other thing I want to say about appraisals is last week I taught a class here on appraisals, and you should review my class on YouTube on appraisals. It's called The Price is Right, because the other thing you're going to do at this point is make sure your buyer understands the outcome possibilities. What happens if the appraisal comes in high, at the price, or lower? What are your choices? And you want to have a conversation with your buyer about this before the appraisal comes back, so they're ready. Right? All right, let's keep going. You get to file your commission demand. In Keller Williams, you must do it through KW Command. If your transaction coordinator is going to do it, review it before it goes through. If you do not do this, you will not get paid on time. I had an agent in Oakland in the new agent program who did it the day before closing, and getting her paid on time was a real struggle because no one had had a chance to review it yet, make sure it was right. So when you get your first deals, all your deals, put them into command right away, so that you can get paid on time. There are two things to get paid on time. Number one, get the demand in. Number two, get all the paperwork in. If you're missing legal paperwork, the brokerage will send the file back. And it's all automated. You get alerts and whatnot for that. Darwin, you got some of those alerts, right? About your folder, your file compliance during escrow. Maybe your escrow officer did. But anyway, you need to make sure all your documents are filed. All right. Verify the loan status. Okay, you are not passive watching the lender and the buyer. You get involved with the buyer's lender and the buyer in the manner of this. There's two important deadlines. The first deadline is when the loan contingency is due to be removed. Okay, so you need to know what's going on with the loan. I recommend at least 3 days before that to forestall and get ahead of any problems. And also before the lender puts their money in. The lender putting their money into escrow is one of the very last steps in the deal before your buyer gets their keys. Before that, you should be checking in with the lender at least a day before that too. What are you checking for? All of these bulleted points. Did the buyer get all the documents that are supposed to get over to the lender for processing? Is processing of the file complete? Has it gone to underwriting yet? Has it come back out of underwriting yet? Are there any special conditions on the loan before the lender will send the documents to be signed at the buyer signing table? And are there any special conditions before the lender will put the money into escrow? Those are some of the key questions you want to ask. What is the difference between loan processing and underwriting? What is the difference? What do you think the difference is?
Processing is working with paperwork. Underwriting is qualification.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly right. The loan processor is making sure that all the paperwork is there. They're making sure that all the W-2s, all of the tax returns, all of the Social Security award letters, all of the child support award letters, that the employment are in hand, and they're making sure that the employment has been verified, that they are working where they say they're working, and they are earning the salary they reported earning on their loan application. They're just making sure the file is complete. They are not auditing the file. That's what an underwriter does. An underwriter's job is to assess risk. The job of the underwriter is to make sure that the bank that is on the line, who's putting the most money into a deal, the buyer or the lender? By far, right? In almost all cases, even 20% down means 80% financing. So who's taking most risk? The lender. So they have these people called underwriters, and their job is to make sure that this risk is okay. Because what does the bank not want to happen? Foreclosure. Foreclosure happens when they don't pay their mortgage. So this is a big deal. The underwriter will, I like to say, crawl underneath rocks to find reasons why they shouldn't lend the money. So This clear to close is a big deal. And deals fall apart all the time because of underwriting. You need to be on top of this before your buyer hears about it, ideally, or at least at the same time. You need to know what's going on with the buyer's loan. So that's what this step is all about. Do you guys have any question about this? Does everyone getting a sense now of how big a job we have to play in managing an escrow? Does everyone realize that most buyers out there have no clue that you're doing all this work? This is part of developing a value proposition. When you go out there on Thanksgiving and you're talking to family and friends, and they seem to think you don't do anything to earn the money you're earning, you're 2.5%, and they think, but you're all overpaid, start talking to them about this stuff. You have no idea what I do. I'm insulted you don't think I'm worth that money. Here's all the things I do. Anyway, sorry. I'm off topic. Sorry, everyone. It's Thanksgiving week and everyone's going to have conversations about real estate. Tell your family and friends what you do and how hard we work. Verify loan status. We just did that. Okay. Complete your AVID. So remember, the buyer agent has to do an agent visual inspection as well as the listing agent. And normally you don't go and do this until you're in contract. Even in a non-contingent offer, you typically don't do it till after. So you need to go to the site and do your inspection. You need to send your inspection to the buyer to review, and you need to send it to the listing agent once it's signed by you and the buyer. I'm going to take a quick detour here. We are running out of time, but I'm going to take a quick detour. On the agent portal, on your agent portal, you can go into your agent portal. There is a quick cheat sheet on how to do an AVID. And I want you guys to know about this because a lot of people don't know how to, they do an agent for their new agent assignment, and maybe it's been a long time since then and they're getting their first deal, or maybe they didn't see this cheat sheet, but I have a cheat sheet for you. If I can open up my thing here. What's going on here? And if you go to productivity coaching on the portal, and then you go down to resources, and then you go down to the toolkit, and you click it, it will take you in and you'll see agent visual inspection disclosure. And when you click on that, you can load this document, which describes tips for completing this report. Okay, so it's a resource for you. I recommend you use. Okay, getting back to our class. Doing the AVID is something you need to do. You absolutely want to do this before the day when you remove your loan investigation contingency, and your buyer needs to sign it and it needs to be sent to the other side. Yes.
Question for the AVID, we can just grab the paper, right, when they do the walkthrough. And also, I think there's a app called like Grade or something.
Glide.
Glide.
Yeah, I use Glide. So with Glide, you can walk through the house and verbally say things. You don't have to type anything down or enter it manually, and it automatically helps you fill out the report. I don't recommend leaving it to the final walkthrough. You should do your AVID early. Yeah. But it's a visual inspection, but I recommend doing it as early as you can.
Can you go there like do the AVID with your client?
Yes, although, yes, I've done it with the client there. I've done it when the home inspector's there. I've done it when the appraiser is there. Yeah, it doesn't matter. You can do it with your buyer, but I prefer to get it done and not have them asking me lots of questions and then share the report with them. Because, it's a really a visual thing. Scratches on the countertop, a gap between the bathtub and the floor tile, things you observe about the property that anyone who should be able to see, right? It's not an invasive inspection. Okay. All right. I just told you this, right? Okay. Remove contingencies. So in our example, there's a contingency removal deadline for each of the items. You have to get those removed by the contingency or take other steps. So you want to discuss the client options for each contingency removal no later than the day it's due. You want to complete a CR form, contingency release, for each one you're going to remove as necessary, and send the form to the listing agent. And then you may need to contact the listing agent and talk about it if you're not removing it or if you're asking for a change in the contract. So that's all part of your job too. Final walkthrough. Now we're getting to the end. All the contingencies have been removed. Now we're gearing up to closing, right? So the first thing you're going to do within 3 to 5 days of closing is a final walkthrough. The final walkthrough is required by the purchase agreement, non-negotiable. It's in the purchase agreement. So you want to schedule a date for the site visit with your buyers. Discuss the purpose of this inspection and its limitations with your buyer, because this is a very specific inspection. Complete the VP. VP stands for verification of property condition, and that's what we use for showing everybody that this has been done in the contract. We then send that to the listing agent once it's signed, and if we have to make any comments on it, we call the listing agent to discuss what the comments were. Does anybody know what the limitations are of a final walk? What is the limitation? Anyone know? Any guess?
I don't think you can cancel the contract.
That's right. You cannot cancel the contract if you find something on this inspection. All you can do is ask for remediation from the seller, which they're obligated to do, right? So there are 3 things that happen on a final walkthrough, and only 3 things. And you want to tell your buyer this emphatically, either beforehand or when you're opening the door. Number 1, you are inspecting the property to make sure that it is in substantially the same condition as when the offer was accepted. There's no puddle of water in the kitchen floor. Been there, right? There's no broken window in the garage. Been there, right? Everything looks more or less the same. Number 2, all the seller's crap is gone. And when I say crap, I mean all their personal property that shouldn't be there at the close of the deal. This would include not just furniture, but also all the debris behind the shed at the back of the backyard. Been there. Stuff in the attic and stuff that is accessible, and stuff that is in the basement. And so exterior and interior personal property should not be there. And that should be noted on the report if it's still there when you go to do this report. The seller has an obligation to get rid of all that stuff at their expense, I might add. What's the third thing? The third thing is, let's suppose during the deal the seller agreed to make repairs. Your final walkthrough is the opportunity to make sure that the repairs were done right. That's it. That's all this report's for. Okay, you've done the final walkthrough. Usually the next day after that, the buyer's going to sign documents. That's a very formal thing. They sit with a notary, and they do this either at the escrow office, or they do this in their office, their own home, or they do this as a coffee shop, or they come to your office to sign. And you want to make sure your clients know that is when they're going to be officially signing the loan paperwork to commit themselves to the loan and preparing all the documents for closing. They should at that point know exactly how much cash they have to bring to closing beyond the deposit. And they need to know all the money terms, what their monthly payment's going to be, all that good stuff is final. If there are any mistakes, this is the last chance to find them, right? But nowadays we don't see the mistakes very much. And you should go. If you can go, try very hard to go to this, because this is a moment of celebration. This is a happy time, and you want your client to associate you with happy times. Okay. All right. Then recording. Yeah. Recording happens on the day of close by definition. The deal closes when it records, and it records on the day of close, right? And that could be the exact day. Sometimes you'll have a deal that records late, and you need an extension of time addendum with the seller, but typically it's the last day. And you want to tell your buyer, I am so excited. We should record tomorrow by 11 to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Wait, look out to hear from me. So also, a very important thing about recording, you do never allow your buyer, or if you're seller, the buyer, to put personal property on site at all, anywhere, before it records. That creates huge insurance liability risk. So they can't move their stuff. They can't put the car in the driveway. They can't put stuff in the garage or on the sidewalk in the front of the house. They cannot do anything until the recording happens. After that, they can start moving stuff, but not before. And they certainly can't go live there. I'm just going to stay overnight. No, that ain't happening. Okay. And then as soon as you learn of recording, escrow will contact you. You immediately contact your client. Ideally, get on the phone with them. Hey, can you chat for a minute? Is the text. I have update on our sale. Don't text them. I mean, you can. Congratulations, text is fine. But I like to talk on the phone. Can I chat for a few minutes? Great news, we've recorded. It's like the conversation when their offer gets accepted. You can send them a text, but how boring is that? Better to send, hey, can we chat for a minute, and get on a phone call with them, or even a Zoom. Right? Share happy news. All right, you're going to give them the keys. The key should be given to your buyer no later than the same day of closing. Even if you close at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you want your buyers to have the keys. You do not want to delay. You do not want to be sitting on the buyer's keys or have them in a lockbox inaccessible. They get their keys when the deal closes. That should be your standard. Okay. So you're going to meet the client at the property. Ideally, you should meet them at the property. Don't meet them at an office of the seller to pick up the keys. Don't have someone deliver the keys to your buyer, right? Go meet them. Make a big deal about this. You actually should go early. Go early wherever you need to go to get those keys. Usually a lockbox on the property, but it could be at the listing agent's office, whatever. Get the keys and then go present the keys. Make it into an experience. Make it formal and fun. It's formal because here are the keys to your new house. And it's fun because you take selfies and pictures and stuff and you make a big celebration. Maybe you bring them the present. Maybe you bring them a closing present right there and then. Advise the listing agent that the lockbox is now empty, if necessary, and that they can remove their lockbox and their sign in the yard. Tell them. They'll go. Tell your buyer in the next day or two, the listing agent's going to come by. They're going to remove their lockbox from the door and they're going to take that sign away in the next day or two. If it doesn't happen, please let me know, Mr. Buyer. Celebrations. This is the last one of these. Don't forget to celebrate and honor and be thankful because you just got a paycheck. But in addition to that, you want to send and deliver a closing gift to your buyer. Maybe you want to have a closing gift to someone else that played an important part in the deal. Maybe you want to leave a gift in the house for your buyers to find. That's fun. Maybe you want to send a thank you note to all the key players in the transaction who helped it to work. And you're not done yet. You want to arrange for follow-up check-ins. So, Mr. Buyer, when are you moving in? I'm so excited. Oh, I'm going to be moving in over the next 2 weekends. May I follow up with you and see how it goes? Oh, sure. Or we're probably not going to move in for a month or so. We're off to Paris for our granddaughter's wedding, and we're going to be kind of busy, but we're probably going to move in about a month. Do you know anyone who can help us with moving companies? You're going to have a conversation about it, but your job is to follow up. And if they say it's going to be a month or whatever they say, you say, great, I'm going to be checking in with you just to see how things are going. Okay. All right. Last slide. Breathe through this, especially your first few transactions. Am I right? The first two are a little stressful because you've never done it before, right? So breathe. Remember that real estate transactions are complicated, and no matter how much you study this file, this class, and rewatch these videos or whatever, stuff's going to happen that isn't covered here. I guarantee it. Real estate transactions are complicated and things happen. This is just a very basic case, very simple case, right? So you must remain professional. You might be super nervous inside and you need to bring your client off the ledge. Darwin, did that happen to you with your client, that they were a little more nervous and you had to be the calm voice of reassurance?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of our job. We are the calm voice of reassurance.
Also, I got nervous.
Yeah, but you hid it from your buyer. Yeah, of course you did, because it's nerve-wracking. These things can. I know I've been nervous before. Alam, you're very experienced. You get a little crazy inside, but the client should never see it, buyer or seller, right? The other thing I want to say, and I said this before, but I want to finish with this. Your job is to be a fiduciary to your client, which means looking out for their best interest, even if it means they don't buy the house. Don't be thinking about the check. Think about, how am I serving my client and serving their best interest? That's got to be your top of mind. And sometimes that will mean your client will make a different interest. Sometimes it'll mean talking them off the ledge and calming them down. Remember that as nervous as you are, they are 10 times that nervous, especially if they're buying their first ever home, right? It's nerve-wracking. It's a lot of money. It's a big thing. They're going to be living there for years. It's going to change their life. It's going to change who they interact with, who they meet, new friends, new communities, new everything. That's intense. So look out for their best interests always. All right. Any last questions? All right. So now you guys are all ready to manage your first deal. So what you have here is a QR code. If you click on this QR code, you can get not only a copy of this presentation, but you get to fill out a quick little questionnaire for me, a Google form. about how you felt about this presentation. And my assistant will send you the presentation. And we are done. Did everybody get it? Everyone got it? Okay. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube, thank you very much for watching. And